I showed you a trading card game that raised £20 million before it had even sold a single card, you'd probably think it was set for life. But then you have to look at what's happened to almost every other Kickstarter TCG that has come before it. MetaZoo, $500,000 raised, and it's gone. Altered TCG, $4 million raised, and it's gone as well. So what exactly does it mean that Cyberpunk TCG has just become the most successful Kickstarter TCG project of all time? So when Weirdco approached me asking if I wanted to make a video about Cyberpunk, I made it very clear that I'd have to be able to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's exactly what we're gonna do. So let's have a look. But one thing I can confidently say right now is Cyberpunk TCG is built different. Before we get into Cyberpunk, let's have a look at the Kickstarter TCG problem and why they just keep on failing. Because it's not just bad luck, there is actually a pattern. A new game will launch, early sales are amazing, speculation hype is through the roof, collectors are trying to catch the next Evolving Skies or Prismatic Evolutions long before the masses do, all trying to make a quick buck. But then slowly but surely interest fades, and without a faithful player base to back it up, the whole thing collapses. Add to that the brutal economics of the TCG industry, where titans like Pokemon and Wizards of the Coast can benefit by enormous economies of scale, taking advantage of much lower shipping and printing costs that other companies simply haven't got a chance at negotiating for. Something that a small Kickstarter team can have no chance of competing with. The creator of Alestrals, another Kickstarter TCG, who are trying to do things right, made a great video breaking down exactly how these traps work, and how he is trying to get around them. It's a pretty good video, I recommend the watch. So with all of that in mind, how will Cyberpunk do or be any different? Can it dodge such a similar fate? Or more specifically, what can it do to make sure it can survive? To me, I think there are 3 things that Cyberpunk can do to help stand out from the Kickstarter market and become a fully fleshed, successful trading card game. Let's have a look at these 3 things in detail now. The first one is an IP. The most successful trading card games normally have massive IPs behind them. Pokemon, One Piece, Riftbound, Lorcana. If you were to look at something like MetaZoo and Altered, they didn't have that. Well, this is the easiest one for us to look at here today, because Cyberpunk 2027 is the 25th best-selling video game of all time, resulting in a Netflix show as well. And that's well after the decades-long tabletop series as well. So after that, I think it's safe to say we can scratch off the IP. Cyberpunk should be safe there. But how exactly is the game itself the biggest pillar of these 3? Let's find out. Is the game actually good? Short answer, yes. Long answer, oh yes. And I say this as someone that went into the game very skeptical, because there are some mechanics that we will cover later on that are truly terrifying and might send some TCG players running for the hills, never to look back again. But real quick before we get into it, this isn't going to be a massive explaining how to play Cyberpunk TCG. There are plenty of videos here on YouTube that discuss it in much more detail than I possibly can, including some from Weirdco, the developers themselves. But what we are going to do is look at some of the mechanics, how they work, and my experiences after playing the game for a few weeks. But from the ground up, you can tell that the design team took this very seriously. They have borrowed certain mechanics and traits of other TCGs and planted them straight into Cyberpunk. They've actually taken the best bits rather than just copying the surface level stuff, leading to an eclectic chimera of TCGs. But honestly, it's quite fun. Think of Lorcana's creature system, Star Wars Unlimited style equipment and Gundam as well, a Duel Masters-esque win condition, and a Commander style for Magic the Gathering and One Piece as well. It kind of sounds like a mess on paper, but trust me, it all blends together beautifully. Going first or second, this can be handled awfully in other trading card games. But one of the smartest decisions that Weirdco have made is how they have managed the first turn advantage. Because the player on their first turn going first will be capped at using only 2 of a potential 4 resources, whereas the player going second can make use of all 4 on their first turn. This actually matters a lot, because in other TCGs, going first is just simply objectively always the best. Whereas in Cyberpunk, this resource change actually shakes up a little bit. This means if you're going second, you can get the head start on board advantage, equipment, or trying to get your leaders into play earlier as well. One thing I absolutely adore about the Cyberpunk TCG is that you start with 3 or 4 resources out the gates, which means you can get a 4-cost card in play as early as your second turn of the game. Because in other mana games like Lorcana, it feels like the high ink cards just come into play way too late since you start at 1 ink. So cards that are 5 cost or higher, you just never see, and that makes me sad. However, in Cyberpunk, since you start off with 4, you can get the 5, 6, 7 cost cards into play much earlier. But this doesn't just benefit, the high cost cards as well. This means if you want to play a deck that goes wide, you can also do that much more effectively and earlier as well, meaning your cards will have a greater effect on the game. This also means hybrid strategies are much more possible, since you can have a mix of low cost cards and high cost cards, knowing confidently that you will be able to use them all by like your 3rd turn of the game. Absolutely love it. Anytime multiple playstyles are supported, I'm happy, and it seems to be that Cyberpunk is ticking that box massively right now. This sort of hybrid strategy that supports high cost and low cost creatures at the same time also makes its way into the win condition, gigs. The way you win in Cyberpunk is by accumulating 6 gigs, the game's version of life points or shields if you're playing Duel Masters. If you start the turn with 6 gigs, you win. You steal gigs by attacking your opponent directly, similar to Duel Masters. Sounds easy, right? If your low cost card attacks your opponent, they can steal 1 gig. So if you have 2 creatures and they both attack, you can steal 2 gigs. However, what I really like is that if a character card has 10 or more strength, they can actually steal 2 gigs with 1 attack. So again, this is incentivizing players to not just go wide and use loads of little creatures. You can actually play up big creatures, buff them up with equipment, and start swinging for 2 gigs at a time. I absolutely adore this. In the games I've played with the early influencer kit, you can have cards like Big Jackie Wells come out of nowhere and start to swing the game back in your favor, proving really hard to deal with. But again, wide players can chip away with multiple small attacks. Both paths to victory feel very real and possible, and balanced, which is great for the game's long-term health and supporting of the metagame. The legend mechanic, arguably the game's best part. This is Cyberpunk's take on Magic the Gathering's Commander leader, or the Star Wars Unlimited leader, or the One Piece leader as well. And I actually think it might be the most interesting version of that kind of idea we have ever seen in a TCG. You start with 3 legend cards placed face down at random. They function as resources. When you want to reveal one, you can pay 2 resources to flip it over, but since they are randomized, you will never know exactly what the card is before it's flipped over. There are 3 types of leaders. Passives, like the Arizaka legends. Yuanobu, for example, draws cards when your street cred is high enough, more on that later. Saburo buffs your units in play. Flip is the second type of legend card, and they do as they say, like in Yu-Gi-Oh for example. When they get flipped over, an effect will trigger, like Victor, who will let you dig equipment from the top few cards of your deck. But then lastly, Go Solo Legends. These are probably my favourite, as Go Solo Legends can be played straight from your resources as a unit, with no summoning sickness, so they can get straight into battle straight away, and they tend to have higher stats to support them as well. Each type of leader rewards a completely different playstyle. If you was to have 3 Go Solo Legends for example, you will have an incredible board presence and reactive options as well. If you was to have 3 Flip Legends, you can sort of build your deck around incredible power spike turns, meaning that if you were to flip over a legend, you would know you would always get some flip in some capacity. And if you wanted to have 3 passive legends, you could sort of just buff up your little guys and have them with +1s, +2s, or draw a lot of cards as well at the same time. The randomization here I think is the only thing that will split opinions. Because for some people, like in Star Wars, Magic the Gathering, or One Piece, you know exactly what your leader is, so you can build your deck around being able to use it on certain turns. It's very stable. It's not random. However, in Cyberpunk, it could be argued that you get the worst of both worlds. Since there are 3 leaders and you can't use the same one more than once, you don't know exactly which one you're going to get unless you use cards to see them beforehand, which can be costly. And let's say you might not be able to find 3 legend cards that all play in this kind of play style that you want, meaning their effectiveness is kind of watered down for your deck's play style. I can see why people might not like this. In my opinion, the randomization leads to very high octane gaming, because if you hit the legend when you need it at the right time, it is exhilarating and can really turn the game around right there and then. But if you miss the legend you want 2 turns in a row, it can be very deflating. There is a genuine design tension here, so this is a mechanic we're going to have to keep our eye on as more cards come out. And I can imagine this will lead to some very fun min-max decks. But also, it could lead to very lopsided matchups where my combination of 3 leaders have absolutely no chance against yours. But for now, I'm a fan. But now we're going to get onto the things to watch, and let's address the elephant in the room, the dice. Because I'll be completely honest, when I first heard that this game relied on dice rolls once per turn at a minimum, I winced. Dice in TCGs can make a lot of players immediately uncomfortable. Variance is already present via top decks and stuff like this, so adding a dice roll on top of that can feel like it's too much. Your total street cred is the sum of the dice that you have in play, and you have to roll 1 die every turn, and you have 5 to choose from, with the D20 having to be the last dice you roll into play. Certain cards have effects that will only activate above having a certain threshold of street cred. And this is where it gets interesting, because there is actually strategy in what dice you will roll at what time. And it's something that I see get miscovered in other Cyberpunk videos. Because if you only need 2 extra street cred, rolling a D12 is kind of risky, because a high roll makes it a much bigger target for your opponent to steal, and then they will benefit from having the extra street cred. Rolling a D6 is probably the smarter play. But what I find is strange that in other Cyberpunk TCG coverage, a lot of people will say always just roll the highest dice and that's what wins games. But because if I know my opponent is playing a deck that loves high street cred, why would I roll my high dice straight away for them to steal? Doesn't make sense. And it's this kind of nuanced decision making that actually makes the street cred mechanic not as painful as I think it could be. So for now, I would say that the street cred mechanic is okay. But what I would say is that I've only played the game with the very limited card pool right now. I would imagine that as sets come out and cards get stronger, that some combination of early dice rolls and crazy strong cards could make this get out of hand. For example, let's say there's a card that has a sort of high stats, and it has an effect where if you have, I don't know, 4 or more street cred, it gains blocker early on. So that means you can roll your high dice early, get its blocker activation, meaning your opponent can't stop it, and then on your next turn you can play some high power cards that work well off that street cred. If we see any kind of combination like this, and quite honestly I'm sure there's many more that we could think about right now, it could get out of hand. And that's going without saying. Sometimes, let's say you needed a 2 off a D6 and you roll the 1, that's always going to make you feel sad. And there is no way around that when you're having to roll 1 dice every turn. Another thing that's really upset me though is the resource system. If a card has the euro-dollar symbol on it, you can put it face down in your resource pile and use it as a resource for the rest of the game. If a card hasn't got that euro-dollar symbol, then it cannot be put down as a resource. If you play Lorcana, it is identical to the inking system there. Why do I hate this? Well, I feel as if from all the mana mechanics, like, you know, Magic the Gathering's land system, Pokemon Energy, Lorcana Ink, and now this is probably my least favorite way of having it handled. Because in Pokemon, let's say, you'll have a whole host of cards that are built to find energy, like Earthen Vessel, for example. The same can be said for Magic the Gathering as well. But in Lorcana or in this, because so many cards are essentially resourceable, you're not going to have that. So if you don't open many resourceable cards after your mulligan, you are going to be simply stuck. Now bear in mind, using your leaders as resources does alleviate this a little bit in a way that Lorcana doesn't, for example. But many a times I've been playing the Corpo deck and I just run out of resources rather early on, and there's simply nothing I can do about it. Losing like that is really sad. But I do kind of get it, because making a card non-resourceable is sort of like a balancing factor, right? But it will just feel so sad if you keep drawing non-resource after non-resource after non-resource, because there'll literally be nothing you can do about it. It could just be a way that the pre-cons that have been sent out and how they've been built, that the Arasaka deck is just a bit more prone to it. Could be fine. You know, when the actual full card list come out, you can always build a deck that would have, you know, 100% resourceable cards, and then this won't be an issue. But for now, I have to be honest, in these early games I've been playing, it has been so sad to lose a game that way. So back to the original question, can Cyberpunk survive? Every Kickstarter TCG that has came before it and raised this amount of money has unfortunately died. MetaZoo had hype, Altered had funding. What makes Cyberpunk different? Let's look back at our 3 pillars again from earlier. First, the IP. It's safe to say that Cyberpunk is definitely the biggest IP that our trading card game has had on Kickstarter so far. If people are just walking into a local card game shop and they see Cyberpunk's packs, some of them will buy them just out of, love of the franchise. That is a massive draw that something like MetaZoo or Altered just simply never had. That might be the biggest single structural advantage that this game has. Encouraging purchases without marketing spend is huge, and the biggest thing Cyberpunk has going for it, demonstrated by the immense Kickstarter support. Something else I want to draw attention to is the staff, Weird Co. Weird Co is a brand new company. This is their very first project. That is legitimately scary. This is like handing a Ferrari to a newly passed learner driver. It could go well, for sure, but it could also get out of hand. But to be fair, they have hired people from across the industry, including Wizards of the Coast, for example. So the talent is there, who have the experience to weather this storm and keep the ship pointing the right way. But I tell you what, the initial test doesn't get bigger than this. But the third pillar that we haven't looked at here yet, organized play. Because this is the interesting one. This is the one that will save Cyberpunk. Because launches don't kill Kickstarter TCGs. We have seen many successful launches. But it is structured, organized play that will keep wind in the sails for Cyberpunk for years and years and years. Weird Co. already have their organized play structure published. Pre-released, regionals, invitationals and world championships. If they execute this will build a real community rather than a hype-driven bubble. And as we all know, bubble chasers do not show loyalty, they just buy, stash and sell. And once those numbers go down, they will find the next project to rinse and repeat. So competitive play, fostering an actual community, will stop that. And their competitive plans look good so far in my opinion, fostering local support, high-level competitive gameplay, and a massive jewel in the crown world championships. So if those three things all work together, in my opinion, strong IP, held down by strong staff with an experienced roadmap, a great game with fantastic mechanics and excitement, with a robust tournament play structure, I genuinely believe that Cyberpunk will be a fantastic addition to a very crowded trading card game marketplace. But I would be lying if I said that the path isn't going to be hard. I, for one, am very excited to see how it will pan out. So if you're excited about this game, what can you do? Well, I would get yourself over to their Kickstarter page and get their print and play decks printed off so you can have a crack. I think this is a very good idea actually that they've done. So you can get a feel for all the cards, how they work, see if you like the street cred mechanic, see if you like the leader mechanic, see if you're as unlucky as me when it comes to the resources, for example. And if you like the game, keep an eye on that Kickstarter page. So I think you can still do some late pledges as well, and keep an eye on the release schedule and all that stuff. But please don't take my opinion for it. I want you to form your own opinion from gameplay and your experiences. And let me know in the comments what you think about Cyberpunk TCG, the most successful Kickstarter TCG of all time. Thanks for watching, and if you want to watch something else, why don't you watch this video here, where we go through the quickest TCG losses ever caught on camera.